The first thing I want to say is that there is no single bedtime that has been proven to be perfect for every person over 70. Not 8 p.m. for everyone, not 9 p.m. for everyone, and not some magical hour that guarantees perfect sleep, perfect memory, and perfect health. But there is a window, a pattern, a timing range that appears to fit the biology of many older adults better than the very late schedules that have become normal in modern life. And the interesting part is that the answer may be earlier than you expect. For many healthy adults over 70, a bedtime somewhere around 9 to 10:30 p.m. may align more naturally with the aging body clock, especially when it allows roughly 7 to 8 hours of nighttime sleep and a consistent morning wake time. But the clock on the wall is not the whole story. The real question is not simply, what time should you go to bed? The real question is, what time is your brain beginning to prepare for sleep? What time is your body becoming biologically ready for sleep? And what time will allow you to get enough restorative rest without spending half the night awake? Because after 70, sleep does not work exactly the way it did at 25. Your internal clock changes, your hormones change, your sleep architecture changes, your sensitivity to light changes. Your sleep becomes more fragile, more easily interrupted, and more dependent on what happens during the several hours before bedtime. And this is where most bedtime advice becomes too simple. Someone says, just go to bed earlier. But if you go to bed at 7 p.m. and your brain is not ready for sleep, you may spend 2 hours staring at the ceiling. Then you wake at 2 a.m. and wonder why you cannot fall back asleep. Someone else says, stay up as late as possible so you sleep through the night. But if your body clock has already shifted earlier, staying awake until midnight may mean fighting your own biology, increasing evening alertness, and reducing the amount of sleep you actually get. So today I want to walk you through what is literally happening inside the aging sleep system. The shifting body clock, the changing melatonin signal, the loss of deep sleep. The reason many older adults naturally become sleepy earlier, the bedtime range researchers have studied, and then, based on all of that, we will build a realistic evening schedule that makes the answer feel logical, not because someone on the internet announced a magical number, because you will understand the mechanism. And when you understand the mechanism, the bedtime question becomes much easier to answer. Let's build it from the ground up. The first thing you need to know is that sleep is controlled by two systems working together. The first is sleep pressure. The second is your circadian rhythm. Sleep pressure is exactly what it sounds like. It is the biological pressure to sleep that builds the longer you stay awake. When you wake in the morning, sleep pressure is relatively low. As the day continues, it gradually builds. By night, after many hours of being awake, your brain is carrying a strong biological demand for rest. The chemical adenosine plays an important role in this process. As your brain uses energy throughout the day, adenosine accumulates. The more it accumulates, the sleepier you tend to feel. Caffeine interferes with this system by blocking adenosine receptors. It does not erase sleep pressure, it temporarily hides it. That is why someone can drink coffee at 5 o'clock in the afternoon and say, I'm not tired at all, while the underlying pressure to sleep is still building underneath the surface. The second system is your circadian rhythm. This is your internal timing system. It regulates daily changes in alertness, body temperature, hormone release, digestion, and sleepiness. The central clock is located in a small region of the brain called the suprachiasmatic nucleus, or SCN. It does not operate in isolation. Light enters your eyes. Specialized cells in the retina detect that light. Signals travel to the brain's clock system. The clock then helps coordinate the timing of melatonin, body temperature, cortisol, and alertness. Your body is not simply waiting until you decide to go to bed. It is preparing for sleep according to a schedule. And that schedule changes with age. A review of aging and circadian rhythms published through PubMed Central describes one of the most consistent features of aging sleep. The timing of sleep tends to advance. That means older adults often become sleepy earlier and wake earlier than younger adults. Not necessarily because they are lazy. Not necessarily because they have lost interest in the evening. Their internal timing system may simply be moving forward. The same review explains that the timing of melatonin, body temperature, and cortisol rhythms can also shift earlier with age. This is why a person who used to fall asleep at 11:30 p.m. may naturally begin feeling ready for bed at 9:30 or 10 p.m. later in life. The clock has moved. And here is the part many people misunderstand. An earlier body clock is not automatically a sleep disorder. If someone becomes sleepy at 9:30 p.m., falls asleep comfortably, sleeps adequately, and wakes refreshed at 5:30 or 6 o'clock in the morning, that may simply be their natural schedule. The problem begins when the timing becomes distressing or impractical. For example, someone may become extremely sleepy at 6:30 p.m., fall asleep in front of the television, wake at 1 a.m., and then struggle to return to sleep. Or they may wake at 3 a.m. every day and spend hours awake. That is not always a problem with discipline. It may be a mismatch between the person's internal clock and the schedule they are trying to follow. Now, I want to stop on this point for a moment because it changes how you think about bedtime. Bedtime is not the same thing as the time you enter the bedroom, and the time you enter the bedroom is not the same thing as the time your brain is ready to produce stable sleep. Those three things can be completely different. You can go to bed at 8 p.m. without being biologically ready for sleep. You can stay in bed for 9 hours and sleep for only 6. And you can become sleepy at 9:30 p.m. but delay bedtime until 11:30 because a television program, a phone, or a late meal keeps you awake. The goal is not to obey a number. The goal is to create alignment. Your sleep pressure should be high enough. Your circadian rhythm should be moving towards sleep. Your environment should be sending signals of darkness and quiet, and your schedule should allow enough time for actual sleep. That is the combination that matters. Now let's talk about what changes inside the aging brain. Sleep is not one single state. During the night, your brain cycles through different stages of non-REM sleep and REM sleep. These stages are not interchangeable. Each one has different patterns of brain activity and different relationships with memory, emotional processing, learning, and physical restoration. Deep sleep, also called slow-wave sleep, is especially important because it is associated with large, slow electrical oscillations in the brain. These waves are not just random background activity, they reflect highly coordinated patterns of neuronal firing. But deep sleep becomes less abundant with age. A review titled Sleep in Normal Aging describes several common changes. Older adults tend to experience shorter nighttime sleep, more awakenings, more time awake during the night, less slow-wave sleep, and more frequent daytime naps. The proportion of lighter stage 1 and stage 2 sleep tends to increase, while slow-wave sleep and REM sleep tend to decrease. This means that the sleep of a 75-year-old may look very different from the sleep of a 25-year-old. Even when both people spend the same number of hours in bed, the older adult may fall asleep quickly but wake several times. They may spend more time in lighter sleep. They may wake earlier than intended, and they may feel as if the night was long, even if the total amount of sleep was not extremely low. This is why the idea of simply sleeping 8 uninterrupted hours becomes unrealistic for many older adults. The structure of the night changes. The sleep becomes more vulnerable to noise, temperature, pain, bladder signals, medications, stress, and light. But there is another factor that deserves attention: melatonin. Melatonin is not a sleeping pill, it is a timing signal. When the environment becomes dark, the brain normally begins increasing melatonin production. That increase tells the body that biological night is approaching. It helps shift the body toward a state that is more compatible with sleep. But the nighttime rise in melatonin is generally reduced with aging. A review of normal sleep and aging reports that older adults often have lower nighttime melatonin levels than younger adults. This decline may contribute to more sleep disruption and weaker timing signals. Think about it this way: when you are young, your body clock may send a large, clear nighttime signal. Darkness arrives, melatonin rises, body temperature begins to fall, alertness decreases, sleep becomes easier to initiate. With age, that signal may become quieter, not absent, just quieter. And when a biological signal becomes quieter, the environment matters more. Bright lights in the evening matter more. A television shining across the room matters more. A phone held close to the face matters more. Irregular wake times matter more. A late cup of coffee matters more. The body may still be capable of sleep, but the timing signals have become easier to disrupt. This is one reason the evening routine becomes increasingly important after 70. Not because a bedtime ritual is fashionable, because the aging circadian system may need clearer information. Darkness, regularity, a predictable sequence, a stable wake time. These are not decorations around sleep, they are part of the timing system. Now let me bring in the question of how much sleep is actually needed. The National Sleep Foundation's consensus recommendations list 7 to 8 hours of sleep for adults age 65 and older. The American Academy of Sleep Medicine and the Sleep Research Society recommend that adults obtain at least 7 hours of sleep regularly to support health and daytime functioning. But these are population-level recommendations. They are not a command that every person must produce exactly 8 hours every night. Some older adults may function well with 7 hours. Others may need more time in bed to obtain 7 hours of actual sleep because their sleep is fragmented, and that distinction is critical. If you spend 8 hours in bed but wake for 1 hour during the night, your actual sleep may be closer to 7 hours. If you spend 10 hours in bed but sleep only 6.5, staying in bed longer has not automatically improved your sleep. The question is not just, what time did you go to bed? The question is, how much of that time was real sleep and how did you feel during the day? This is why a proposed bedtime of 9 p.m. may work beautifully for one person and fail completely for another. A person who wakes at 5:30 a.m. may need a bedtime around 9:30 p.m. to create a reasonable sleep opportunity. A person who wakes at 7 a.m. may naturally sleep later. A person who takes a 2-hour afternoon nap may not have enough sleep pressure at 8 p.m. A person with severe sleep fragmentation may enter bed early but remain awake for long periods. There is no universal number, but there are patterns. One large UK biobank study examined sleep onset timing and cardiovascular disease using wrist-worn activity measurements. The lowest observed risk in that study was associated with sleep onset between 10 o'clock and 10:59 p.m. Now, this finding needs to be handled carefully. It does not prove that going to sleep at 10:15 p.m. prevents heart disease. It was an observational study. People were not randomly assigned to different bedtimes. Sleep timing may reflect many other factors, including work schedules, health status, light exposure, social routines, and existing medical conditions. But it does suggest that very early and very late sleep onset may not be equally associated with health outcomes. The practical interpretation is not everyone over 70 must be asleep at 10 p.m. The practical interpretation is that a consistent bedtime in the late evening, often around 9 to 10:30 p.m. for many older adults, may be a reasonable evidence-informed range when it matches their natural sleepiness and morning schedule. The word that matters is matches. Now let's talk about the brain. Sleep timing has been studied in relation to cognitive health, but this area is complicated. A longitudinal study published in 2022 examined associations between sleep timing, time in bed, dementia, and cognitive decline in older adults. Research in this area has reported associations between unusual sleep timing, long time in bed, sleep disruption, and later cognitive outcomes. But an association does not prove that a particular bedtime causes dementia. This distinction matters enormously. Sometimes early sleep or long time in bed may be a consequence of underlying health changes rather than the original cause. A person developing cognitive impairment may become less active during the day, spend more time in bed, become sleepy earlier, or experience a weaker circadian rhythm. So the evidence does not justify fear. It just tells us that sleep timing, regularity, sleep quality, and cognitive health are connected in ways researchers are still working to understand. The safest conclusion is not to chase an extreme bedtime. It is to protect a regular, adequate, and stable sleep schedule while paying attention to significant changes in sleep, alertness, memory, mood, or daily function. Now, what are many people over 70 actually doing? They wake up early. They get tired after dinner. They fall asleep in a chair at 7 p.m. They wake around 10 p.m. They turn on the television. They eat something. They check their phone. They eventually return to bed at midnight. Then they wake at 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock a.m. and decide their sleep is broken. But look at what happened. The first sleep period was treated as an accident. The late evening awakening was treated as a problem, and the second sleep period was expected to repair everything. In reality, the early evening nap may have reduced sleep pressure. The bright light from the television may have increased alertness. The late snack may have created discomfort or reflux. The phone may have signaled daytime to the brain, and the inconsistent schedule may have weakened the body clock even further. This does not mean an evening nap is always harmful. A short nap may be useful for some people, but timing matters. A brief nap earlier in the afternoon is less likely to interfere with nighttime sleep than a long sleep beginning after dinner. Again, the issue is not morality, it is biology. Your brain does not care whether you call it a nap, a doze, or just resting my eyes. If you sleep for 2 hours at 7 p.m., your body has received 2 hours of sleep. That changes the amount of sleep pressure available later. Now let's build a practical evening sequence, not a rigid prescription, a sequence based on the way the aging sleep system tends to respond. The first step begins in the morning, a stable wake time. The morning is the strongest anchor for your circadian rhythm. The time you wake, the light you receive, and the activity you begin can influence when your body expects sleep later that night. This does not mean waking at an unnatural hour. It means avoiding a schedule that changes dramatically from one day to the next, whenever possible. If you wake at 6:30 a.m. on weekdays and sleep until 10 a.m. on weekends, your internal clock may receive conflicting signals. The result can feel like jet lag without leaving home. The second step is light. Light is one of the most powerful signals that sets the body clock. A review of circadian rhythm sleep-wake disorders in older adults explains that light exposure at different times can shift the clock in different directions. Evening and early night light can delay the circadian phase, while late night and early morning light can advance it. But this is where caution is important. Light therapy is not a universal home remedy, and the clinical evidence for treating advanced sleep timing in older adults remains limited. The review notes that randomized trials are few, some studies show little or no effect, and clinical guidance does not provide detailed universal instructions for intensity, duration, and timing. So the general principle is simple. Regular daytime light and a dimmer, calmer evening environment can support clearer day-night signals. But specialized light treatment is something to discuss with a qualified clinician, especially for someone with eye disease, bipolar disorder, migraine sensitivity, or medications that affect light sensitivity. The third step is movement. Daily activity helps build sleep pressure. It also gives the body a stronger contrast between daytime and nighttime. This does not require intense exercise. Walking, household activity, balance work, gentle strength training, or other movement appropriate to the individual can help create a clearer day. The goal is not exhaustion. The goal is a body that has participated in the day. The fourth step is the evening meal. A large, heavy meal directly before bed may make sleep less comfortable for some people. Reflux, abdominal discomfort, frequent urination, or blood sugar fluctuations can all interrupt sleep. That does not mean everyone must finish eating at the same hour. It means the evening meal should leave enough time for the body to settle before lying down, particularly for people who notice discomfort after late meals. The fifth step is caffeine. Caffeine has a long half-life, meaning a significant portion can remain in the body hours after consumption. A late afternoon coffee may not feel powerful, but it can still influence the ability to fall asleep or remain asleep later. Some older adults metabolize medications and stimulants differently than they did when they were younger. So the cup of coffee that caused no problem at 30 may become disruptive at 75. The answer is not necessarily to eliminate coffee. The answer is to observe timing, quantity, and the relationship with sleep. The sixth step is the light transition. About 1 to 2 hours before the intended bedtime, the environment can begin shifting from daytime to nighttime. Lower lights, less stimulating television, a quieter pace, a familiar routine. The goal is not to force sleep. The goal is to stop sending wakefulness signals. The body needs a bridge. You do not slam the brakes on a moving car and expect the ride to be smooth. You reduce speed gradually. The nervous system often responds better to a gradual transition than to a sudden command to fall asleep. The seventh step is choosing the bedtime itself. For many adults over 70, a reasonable starting range may be around 9 to 10:30 p.m., provided that this schedule fits their natural sleepiness and allows enough time for approximately 7 to 8 hours of actual nighttime sleep. But this range is a starting point, not a law. If you're wide awake at 9 p.m., forcing yourself into bed may create frustration. If you are falling asleep uncontrollably at 7 p.m., the more important question is why. Is the person sleeping poorly at night? Taking medications that cause drowsiness? Napping for long periods? Experiencing depression? Showing signs of a sleep disorder? A sudden change in sleep timing deserves attention because it may reflect something other than normal aging. And if someone snores loudly, gasps during sleep, has witnessed breathing pauses, experiences severe daytime sleepiness, acts out dreams, develops persistent insomnia, or has frequent nighttime confusion, those symptoms are worth discussing with a healthcare professional. This is not because every sleep problem is dangerous. It is because sleep symptoms can have many causes, and personal health decisions require individual evaluation. Now, there is another mistake I want to address. Some people believe that the earlier they go to bed, the healthier they are, but earlier is not always better. If you go to bed before you are sleepy, you may spend more time awake in bed. Your brain can begin associating the bed with frustration, worry, clock watching, and effort. Sleep is unusual because trying harder often makes it more difficult. You cannot command the brain into sleep by force. You create the conditions, you create the timing, then you allow sleep to arrive. This is why the ideal bedtime is not the earliest possible bedtime. It is the earliest time at which sleep pressure and circadian sleepiness are working together. For one person, that may be 8:45 p.m., for another, 9:45 p.m., for someone else, 10:30 p.m. The correct range is revealed by what happens next. Do you fall asleep within a reasonable period? Do you remain asleep for most of the night? Do you wake at a consistent time? Do you feel reasonably alert during the day? That pattern tells you more than a bedtime chart. Now I want to return to deep sleep because this is where the issue becomes larger than simply feeling tired. A review on sleep and human aging describes age-related reductions in the amplitude and density of slow waves, particularly in frontal brain regions. It also explains that structural changes in the medial prefrontal cortex are associated with impairments in these slow wave features. Deep sleep naturally declines with age. That does not mean an older adult is failing. It means the brain's nighttime architecture has changed, but protecting the conditions that support sleep becomes more important because there is less reserve. A noisy environment, irregular schedule, alcohol, late caffeine, untreated breathing problems, and long evening naps may have a bigger effect when sleep is already lighter and more fragmented. The solution is not to promise perfect deep sleep. The solution is to remove avoidable disruptions and support the body's natural timing. There is also a common belief that waking up during the night means something has gone seriously wrong. Not necessarily. Older adults often experience more awakenings and more time awake during the night as part of normal aging. The important question is what happens after the awakening. Do you return to sleep calmly, or do you become fully alert, anxious, and frustrated for hours? Do you need the bathroom several times? Are you waking because of pain, reflux, breathing difficulty, nightmares, or medication effects? The clock time itself is not the diagnosis. The pattern and the daytime consequences matter, And this is why the phrase doctors finally reveal the ideal time needs a careful translation. Doctors have not discovered one magical bedtime for every person over 70.